But first, what's making news? And of course, all eyes were on Moscow, with President Xi spending 3 days in the city earlier this week. It was the president's first visit to Russia since the country's invasion of Ukraine last year.
在双方共同努力下，中俄关系始终保持蓬勃、健康、稳定的发展势头。两国政治互信，利益交融，民心相通。
The two leaders held extensive talks during the visit.
The talks yesterday and today, face-to-face, in narrow and expanded formats, were successful. They were held in a warm, friendly, and constructive atmosphere. The two joint policy statements we have just signed fully reflect the special character of Russia and China's relations, which are at the highest point of their development in history. It's an example of true comprehensive partnership and strategic cooperation.
Despite a long-standing relationship, China and Russia say they aren't in a military-political alliance, and China has not declared support for either side during the war. Instead, the Chinese government has offered to be a mediator between Russia and Ukraine and release a 12-point peace plan to help end the war.
We believe that many points of China's peace plan are in sync with Russian approaches and could form a basis for a peaceful settlement when the West and Kyiv are ready for it. However, we aren't seeing any such readiness on their part yet.
The visit also came just days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin for alleged war crimes. But as neither country has signed the international treaty that governs the ICC, their leaders don't recognize the legitimacy of the warrant. Joining me now is Associate Professor Jingdong Yuan, who specializes in Asia-Pacific security and Chinese foreign policy at Sydney University. Professor Yuan, welcome to China Tonight. China claims its relationship with Russia doesn't amount to taking sides, but is there any other way to interpret them coming together in this way at this particular time?
Xi Jinping's visit to Russia at this particular time obviously sends a very strong message about the solidarity of Sino-Russian relations. But I should emphasize this trip was not all about the Ukraine and about China's role as a peacemaker, although in the wake of China's brokered Yuan, Saudi Arabia détente, there was a lot of expectation. I think the trip was more about Sino-Russian relation, their broad geopolitical understanding and consensus of global affairs, and then more substantively is about bilateral economic interactions and economic trade, investment, energy supplies, and so forth.
Is this a case of my enemy's enemy is my friend, a convenience?
So it's less about my enemy's enemy is my friend. It's more about how the two countries sees the benefits of them coming together. Because if you read the joint statement and the previous similar statements, they have very strong consensus on how international relation should be about. It certainly should not be about the U.S. hegemony or what the U.S. described as the rules-based liberal international order, but it should be one that's centered around United Nations Security Council, certainly UN in particular, where both China and Russia sitting on the permanent on the Security Council certainly can wield significant power.
What does President Putin have to gain by meeting with President Xi?
If you think about Putin's situation at the moment, so a year after the invasion, it's very much isolated. You have recent UN Assembly resolution over 140 countries condemning Russian invasion. And Russia is cut off from international financial arrangement or system like SWIFT. And then Western countries are boycotting purchasing of Russian oil. So Xi's visit obviously gives him some claims that Russia can still welcome a global leader. And then if you look at the joint statement in particular with regard to the economic ties, and Russia-China economic relations have improved over the last year in particular, a dramatic increase in two-way trade. Russia is inviting Chinese companies to replace Western companies which had vacated or withdrawn from business or projects in Russia. Certainly, Putin, from a symbolic perspective and from a substantive economic perspective, has certainly gained a lot from this visit.
And what does President Xi have to gain?
Xi Jinping and China wanted to project to the world that China's a responsible great power, and China has something to offer with regard to a peace settlement to the Ukraine war. But also, I think if you look at the symbolism of this visit, both in the broader Sino-Russian relations, but also in the personal context of Xi Jinping-Putin relationship. And Xi went to Russia 10 years ago after he became the president of PRC. And he picked Russia as the first foreign country to visit. Now, 10 years later, Xi Jinping's been announced a third term as the president. Again, he picked Russia as the first foreign country to visit. I mean, Xi Jinping and Putin have met more than 40 times. So this is also a demonstration and display of their friendship and then their close personal ties. So all of these messages, I think, both to domestic audiences, but also to the US and the West, that there is this alignment, and then the US and Western effort to split or undermine this alignment would not be successful.
Professor Yuan, does America and its allies need to react, or is this all largely for show?
I think it might be good for the US and the West to also understand there are differences between China and Russia. China probably has no interest, nor has it the capability to topple the international system. What China wants is to elevate its own position within the system. And Russia is quite different. It's only 10% of China's GDP and doesn't really have a lot to offer except the oil, natural gas, and the military equipment. And so China's interests and Russia's interests, apart from their common opposition to US hegemony, are still very different.
Professor Jingdong Yuan, thank you so much for joining China Tonight.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Now for what's been trending on Chinese social media this week. And there was a lot of chatter about sleep and what constitutes a restful night. A new report has shown that half the Chinese population fails to get 8 hours of sleep every day. And it's the capital, Beijing, who are most deprived of sleep.
I was on a business trip in Beijing, walking alone on the street at midnight. Although there were no other people around, there were still many brightly lit office buildings.
You might as well say that Beijing is the city where people work the most overtime.
I reckon we'd solve a lot of the world's problems if everyone just got a good night's sleep. Like, have you seen those traffic jams in Beijing? It's just because everyone's asleep at the wheel. Anyway, the report also showed that university students slept the longest, followed by white-collar workers, blue-collar workers, and then lastly, the unemployed. What about unemployed university students? Do they just cancel each other out? Authorities in China have long tried to promote the benefits of a full night's sleep. There's even a popular reality television show called Go to Bed at 11 p.m, which follows celebrity contestants as they go about their evening routines to see who can fall asleep first.
为了帮助今天我们的4位挑战者更加顺利地进入睡眠，今天我们的发起人黄子韬也为他们邀请到了10位助眠。
Also trending, check out these images, which got over 500 million views on Weibo. You might not be able to tell, but this is Beijing, covered in a thick layer of sand. China's camel population is loving it. But it's bad news for humans, as the severe sandstorm swept across the city earlier this week, sending air pollution levels sky high. In fact, the air quality index exceeded the monitoring charts according to the Beijing Ecological Environment Monitoring Center.
受这个冷空气和上游沙尘的这个传输的影响，北京在今天的凌晨出现了大风和沙尘的这个天气。那随着这个沙尘的来袭呢，能见度最低呢也降到了不足1公里的。
天气不好，心情就不好，也不愿到公园玩去了。
People were warned not to go outside unless they had to, and to drive slowly because of low visibility.
It's really irritating. I feel like I've inhaled a lot of dust, even indoors.
I think the wind blew away several years of my life expectancy too.
Vacuum cleaners must sell really well in these places.
I'm not sure a Dyson is going to help fight a sandstorm, but hey, you can try. And a man in Zhejiang province has caused quite a stir online thanks to his commitment to tracking his steps every day. He was found unconscious at home after his friend called authorities to check in on his whereabouts. Why? Well, the friend grew worried when the man's daily step tracker displayed no activity on his WeChat. It turns out netizens frequently use the tool to check in on loved ones.
Sometimes I check my older relatives' step tracker records too, and if I find any anomaly, I'll call them to check in.
This is exactly what I rely on to make sure my dad is well. After my mum passed away, I just became a bit paranoid.
You know what? I don't think this is a step counter at all. It's an inheritance tracker. What's Grandma up to? Not much. Now to our final story of the night. We need to be quick because I've had way too much of this and now I have to pee. First prize in China for its medicinal properties, tea is now a daily staple across the world. But there's a lot more to the humble cuppa than I realised. I thought I knew more than the average person about tea. After all, I'd been conditioned as a child to know that a surefire way to please my dad was to serve him a steaming hot cup of tea. In fact, my dad loved tea so much, I don't think I ever saw him drink water. He always had a mug somewhere in the house, even if it had gone cold. But it turns out I didn't know as much as I thought.
It is peaceful, delicate, soothing, and calming. We see it as a universe.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Tea is a universe? Are you saying it's not just about dumping a bag into a mug? It turns out there's a lot more to this humble beverage than I first realised. The story of tea began more than 5,000 years ago in China, where according to legend, leaves from a nearby tree blew into Emperor Shennung's cup of hot water. That was a gum nut. Ugh. It didn't take long for word to spread about the medicinal benefits of the leaves from the Camellia sinensis tree.
It was just kind of seen as something that would keep you awake, that was very useful for Buddhism, for people who wanted to kind of stay awake and be alert for prayers. It was kind of attributed these qualities that were like the opposite of alcohol, like alertness, awakeness.
Chinese tea has been developed into 6 main varieties: green, white, yellow, oolong, black, and dark tea. Correctly drinking tea really gives many benefits to our health life.
Initially reserved for China's elites, tea evolved to become a drink for the masses.
Around the time of the Ming Dynasty, the 17th century, there's this transfer from these elaborate teas to the teas that we recognize today, loose leaf teas, which are plucked off the tree, roasted, rolled, etc., and they look like the teas we would buy today.
Tea culture soon spread across the world, before taking a dark turn thanks to those pesky colonists, the British.
By the 18th century, 19th century, the English East India Company began to really purchase large amounts of tea from China, but they were trying to figure out a way to pay for it. So they eventually discovered that if they could take the opium that was grown on farms in their colony at this time, Eastern India, and brought that to China, then people in China would purchase the opium. They could use the profits from that to purchase the tea and bring it back to Europe and to the English market.
Opium addiction had a strong grip on China until the Cultural Revolution.
The British East India Company declares war on the grounds of defending free trade, but really it's about the profits from tea. They very swiftly win this military naval battle in 1842, and in Chinese history, this is seen as the beginning of the end of the last empire of China, the Qing dynasty. Starting with the Opium War of 1842, this was a century of humiliation that was only ended with the Communist Revolution of 1949.
Tea is the world's most consumed drink after water, so millions of people must be drinking it as I speak. But how many of them realise its complex history? And why didn't Dad teach me that tea was a universe? He didn't even teach me the proper Chinese way to serve it. Shane Xu is a certified tea master and an expert on the ritual of the Chinese tea ceremony. He says the first step is to appreciate the tea by examining the leaves and smelling the aroma. So it smells like a green tea to me, but is it technically a green tea?
Technically, actually, it's oolong tea.
Okay, I failed the tea master test already. The wrong type of tea. The first round of hot water is for rinsing and warming the cups. You then shake the leaves to loosen them, appreciate the tea again, then add another round of hot water to rinse and wake up the flavour.
Wake up the tea.
Shane doesn't need a clock to measure the steeping time because he does it with his breath. 5 breaths later, it's ready to serve.
So enjoy.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Has a really good flavour. Like, it's very clear, but it's very nice. It's strong enough.
The significance of tea ceremony is getting people together for peace. When people come together for tea ceremony, they're not just drinking tea, but also exchanging and learn knowledge through the conversation and the debates.
Tea ceremonies are also a significant ritual at Chinese weddings, called Jingcha, meaning respectfully offering tea. It symbolises the union of the bride and groom's families.
The new couples will be serving the tea to their parents to thanksgiving their life, their best wishes for them.
But Shane says you don't have to wait for a special occasion. Drinking tea every day is a ceremony in itself. Now that I know more about the customs around tea, I feel like I should treat my daily ritual with a bit more respect. You are kind. You are good. You are one with the universe. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, Annie, your dad looks really young and handsome.
Yeah, it wasn't actually my real dad. I had to get a professional actor, but thank you.
So I have a friend in China who's a serious tea drinker. Whenever I visit, he'd act like a tea master. I thought it was all a bit over the top, but having seen your story, now I understand.
Yeah.
There's a universe in your cup.
I know. So I thought that I was a serious tea drinker as well, because I know that you're supposed to have different boiling temperatures for different types of tea. You don't want to over steep your tea or burn your tea. And I also went to yum cha heaps as a kid, and I know how that goes in terms of thanking people. You know, you tap your fingers on the table as a way of saying thanks. So there's still more to learn. So the types of tea, they're not considered true tea unless they come from that particular plant. And also just the respect that is given, I've never learnt to respect my tea because I'm usually in a rush. So that's something I'm going to incorporate into my life.
I didn't know that part as well, so I should do that next time when I go to yum cha. But Annie, I know you also moonlight as a wedding celebrant. So how many tea ceremonies you've been to?
I would say nearly all of my Chinese couples are doing tea ceremonies, and it's their way of incorporating Chinese culture into an otherwise very Western ceremony. And there's not many rules to it. In fact, people are afraid of doing it incorrectly, so they make sure they get an auntie to teach them. But what I learnt from the tea master was that as long as you do the steps in terms of letting each set of parents drink from the cups, and then they might exchange gifts, you know, you're not doing it wrong. So, you know, I think it's more important to retain that piece of culture above all else.
I'd really like a cup of tea right now.
You can have this one. I don't know if it's COVID safe, but...
Thank you.
You're welcome.